Snow drifted across the quiet street like tiny shards of starlight as Emily Hart stepped onto her porch, the cold December air brushing against her cheeks. It was the kind of night Hollyridge was famous for, soft, silent, wrapped in the glow of golden Christmas lights that lined every rooftop. Emily had always loved this hour, when the town felt like it was holding its breath. But tonight, something felt different. Tonight, her heart raced for a reason she couldn't yet name. She pulled her coat tighter, boots crunching on freshly fallen snow as she walked toward her mailbox. She wasn't expecting anything. She never received letters. She was usually the one who sent them, at least in her dreams. So when she opened the metal door and found a single envelope inside, with her name written in elegant handwriting she didn't recognize, she froze. For a moment, the world went still. Emily blinked, her breath catching in her throat. She turned the envelope in her hands, the paper still cold from the winter air. It wasn't Daniel's handwriting. She knew his handwriting by heart after years of watching him sign receipts at the bookstore counter. And this envelope, it wasn't the one she had mailed. Hers had been addressed to him, not to herself. But when she stepped into the warm glow of her cottage and carefully opened the envelope, her stomach dropped. Because the letter inside mentioned Christmas. A confession. Feelings she had written, words she had poured onto paper in a moment of fragile courage. Someone had read her Christmas love letter. Someone who wasn't Daniel, and somehow they had written back. Her trembling fingers unfolded the paper, and as she began to read the stranger's first line, "Your letter found me by accident, but perhaps by fate." Her life quietly, irrevocably, began to change. Hollyridge was a postcard town, small, snowy, and eternally caught in the warmth of a Christmas snowfall. Every shop window glowed with twinkling lights. Evergreen wreaths hung from lampposts. The bakery on Maple Street smelled perpetually of gingerbread. And the bookstore where Emily worked looked like it had been built specifically for cozy winter stories. Emily had lived here all her life, moving through its snow-covered streets like she was part of the landscape. She was quiet, gentle, the kind of person who said more with a soft smile than with words. People liked her. They always had. But no one really knew her. Not the parts that mattered. Certainly not Daniel Reeves. Daniel, kind-eyed, broad-shouldered, with a calm, steady presence, visited the bookstore every December like clockwork. He always bought the newest holiday romance for his mother. He always asked Emily how she'd been. He always smiled in a way that made her heart flutter painfully. And she always answered with small, timid words, too afraid to let him know how she truly felt. The letter had been a moment of release, a way to confess everything she would never dare say out loud. She wrote it one sleepless night beneath the glow of her Christmas tree, her heart pouring out onto the page. But she never meant to send it. She had tucked it into a stack of papers on her desk. Yet when she rushed to prepare her holiday mail, gifts for friends, donation envelopes, Christmas cards, she accidentally swept it into the outgoing pile. It wasn't until 2 days later that she realized her mistake. By then, the mail truck had come and gone. She prayed the letter would never be found, that maybe the world would swallow it before Daniel ever saw it. But the universe had another plan entirely. Her private confession had not only been delivered, it had been delivered to the wrong man. And he had written back. Emily sat at her kitchen table long after midnight, long after the lamps in neighboring houses had dimmed and the town had settled into its winter quiet. The stranger's letter lay open in front of her, its edges softening under the repeated touch of her fingers. She had read it so many times, she could nearly recite the cadence of his sentences. Yet every reading felt like discovering something new, a hidden warmth tucked between lines, a tenderness she had not expected from someone who had never laid eyes on her. She tried to picture him, though it felt impossible. He had shared pieces of himself, careful pieces, gently offered, but none that she could use to shape a face, a posture, or even a tone of voice. His handwriting was steady and elegant, suggesting a patient mind. His thoughts were deliberate, almost lyrical. Whoever he was, he wrote like someone accustomed to listening first and speaking later. And somehow, by an accident of holiday mail, his attention had landed on her, on the softest, most private part of her heart. Snow tapped gently against her windows, and Emily wrapped her arms around herself, letting the hush of winter settle into her bones. She felt foolish, hopeful, frightened, and curious all at once. This wasn't a situation she could have imagined for herself. She had always lived quietly, tucked behind routines and soft habits, never stepping so far outside her world that something like this could happen. Yet here it was. A stranger had read her love letter, her confession written to Daniel Reeves, the man she'd admired for years, and instead of discarding it, he had written back with kindness. She rose and crossed the small living room to the window, watching Hollyridge glitter under the street lamps. The town looked like a snow globe, suspended in warm, golden light. She leaned her forehead against the cold glass, thinking of the bookstore where she spent her days, the creak of the wooden floors, the mingled scent of cinnamon and paper, the sound of bells above the door when customers walked in from the cold. She imagined Daniel, his familiar smile, the gentle way he cradled books as if they held secrets worth protecting. Then, unbidden, she imagined the stranger reading her letter. What had he felt when he realized it wasn't meant for him? What had made him respond instead of ignoring it? There was only one way to find out. She returned to the table, lit a candle, and took a blank sheet of paper from the drawer. Her hand trembled slightly, not with fear, but with the strange exhilaration that accompanies honesty. She began writing back, not with the caution she usually carried, but with a tentative courage she didn't know she possessed. She told him about her days at the bookstore, how she organized the holiday displays, how children pressed their noses against the windows to admire the little wooden reindeer. She told him about Daniel, though carefully, about how long she had admired him, how she had never found the right moment to speak, how the letter he was never supposed to read had been her attempt to release a burden she had carried too long. Her words flowed more easily than she expected. Perhaps because he was a stranger. Perhaps because he had already seen her vulnerability, and instead of turning away, he had offered his own in return. When she finished, she folded the letter carefully and sealed it, pressing her thumb into the cooling wax. She dressed in her warmest coat and stepped outside. The night air embraced her with its crispness as she walked to the mailbox. The world was silent except for the faint whisper of wind and the soft crunch of snow beneath her boots. She slid the letter into the mailbox, feeling a small thrill as it disappeared into the dark slot. Something had begun. Something delicate, uncertain, but undeniably alive. The next days unfolded with the gentle rhythm of December life. At the bookstore, holiday shoppers trickled in with their lists and cheerful chatter. Emily helped a grandfather choose a book for his granddaughter, recommended a mystery novel to a woman who always came in wearing the same red scarf, and wrapped gifts in glittering ribbons. The shop smelled of pine and warm tea, and the windows fogged with breath each time someone stepped inside, but beneath her calm exterior, a thread of anticipation tugged at her. She checked the mailbox each morning, pretending not to hope. Sometimes it held nothing but store flyers or holiday sale announcements, sometimes a Christmas card from a distant cousin. But her heart always jumped when she saw an envelope that didn't belong among the ordinary. On the fourth morning, just as she was about to give up looking, she found a new letter. Her breath caught. She held it carefully, as though it might vanish if she moved too quickly. Inside her cottage, she opened it with shaking hands. The stranger's words spilled out like warmth into cold air. He apologized for taking so long to respond. Work had filled his days, he said, though he found himself thinking about her letter more often than he expected. He wrote about memories of growing up in Hollyridge, of sledding down Maple Hill with friends, of getting scolded by his mother for tracking snow across the kitchen floor. He wrote about the way her honesty had moved him, how rare it was to see someone express longing so openly, even if unintentionally. He confessed, gently, almost shyly, that her courage had surprised him, that he admired it, that he wondered what her voice sounded like when she laughed, or how she looked when she read her favorite books. And then he asked a question. Had she ever met someone who made ordinary days feel brighter just by existing? The question knocked something loose inside her. She knew exactly what he meant, and her thoughts went immediately to Daniel. The quiet ache she carried each time he smiled, the way her pulse stumbled whenever he lingered at the counter to ask about her week. Emily wrote her response quickly but thoughtfully. She told him about Daniel, describing him in gentle, honest strokes. She admitted that she had spent years loving quietly, afraid of disrupting the delicate balance of their acquaintance by confessing anything deeper. She wrote about the vulnerability of loving someone who might not see her in the same way, and how exhausting it was to keep those feelings tucked beneath kindness and small talk. She mailed the letter the same day. As the week progressed, Hollyridge transformed for the annual Christmas festival. Strings of lights appeared across rooftops, lanterns were hung from posts, and wreaths adorned every shop door. Emily passed neighbors carrying boxes of decorations and children dragging sleds behind them. The whole town buzzed with an energy that felt contagious, stirring even the shyest corners of her heart. On Friday, while taking a short break outside the bookstore, she noticed a man walking toward the square. He had a scarf tied loosely around his neck and snowflakes caught in his hair. There was something familiar about him, an ease in his stride, a warmth in his gaze as he glanced around the decorated town. Emily felt a flutter of recognition for reasons she couldn't name. They exchanged a polite nod as he passed, and she felt a blush rise uninvited to her cheeks. For a moment, she wondered if, impossibly, he might be the stranger writing to her. But the thought was too bold, too improbable for someone like Emily. She pushed it away before it could take shape. That evening, the festival lights flickered on, illuminating the town with a golden glow that shimmered against the snow. Music drifted through the air, mingling with laughter and the scent of roasted chestnuts. Emily stood outside for a moment, breathing in the magic that always seemed to settle over Hollyridge this time of year. Later, she returned home to find another letter waiting in her mailbox. Her heart jolted. Inside, the stranger wrote something different, something deeper. He said he felt connected to her in a way he couldn't explain, that her words lingered with him long after he folded the paper. He wrote that he didn't expect anything from her, no meeting, no commitment, but that he cherished the small world they were building through ink and paper. Emily pressed the letter to her chest, overwhelmed by the quiet power of it. She wasn't sure what was happening between them, but she felt, undeniably, that her life had begun to shift, not in sweeping, dramatic strokes, but in small, delicate increments, like snow accumulating on a quiet rooftop until the weight of it changes everything. Emily woke the next morning with the stranger's latest letter still sitting on her bedside table, the edges curled slightly from how often she had touched it before falling asleep. A faint glow seeped through her curtains, carrying with it the pale shimmer of early winter light. She rubbed the sleep from her eyes and reached for the letter again, rereading the final lines. Some connections don't wait for permission. They simply happen, like snowfall. His words lingered like warmth at the center of her ribcage. She dressed slowly, feeling unusually aware of the world around her, the soft rustle of flannel against her skin, the distant jingle of bells from a neighbor's porch, the quiet hum of her kettle heating on the stove. Everything seemed sharper, clearer, as if her senses had thawed after a long freeze. She made her morning tea and stood by the window while it steeped, watching the street come alive with the usual procession of bundled children, early workers, and dogs leaving paw prints in the gathering snow. Yet even in its familiar rhythm, the morning felt different, touched by a secret spark only she could feel. At the bookstore, her steps were light as she unlocked the front door and flicked on the interior lights. The warm glow illuminated the shelves, the garlands draped along the walls, the little ceramic reindeer she had placed beside the register the day before. The place felt like an extension of her heart, cozy, quiet, full of stories waiting for someone to dare open them. She slipped behind the counter to begin organizing the new shipment that had arrived overnight, humming without realizing it. Mid-morning, the bell above the door chimed. Emily looked up, expecting a regular customer. Instead, she found Daniel Reeves standing there, his cheeks flushed pink from the cold, a dusting of snow melting on his shoulders. Her heart fluttered in its usual unsteady rhythm before settling into a heavy, familiar ache. She had imagined this moment countless times, him walking in, her greeting him with effortless confidence, their conversation spilling into something warmer than small talk, but reality always fell short of the dream. "Morning, Emily," he said, offering her a shy smile. "I figured I'd stop by before the shop gets crowded. I need a new book for my mom. You always pick better than I do." His voice was gentle, a little breathless from the cold, and as always, it made something inside her tilt. She forced herself to smile back, trying to ignore how awkward her hands felt as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I think I have just the one," she replied. "She liked the last one you gave her, right?" Daniel nodded, his eyes softening. "She said it was her favorite gift last year. No pressure." They both laughed, a brief, easy sound that warmed the air between them. Emily found comfort in that moment, small as it was. She guided him to the holiday display table and picked up a book with a watercolor cover of snow-covered rooftops. "This one's tender and beautifully written," she said. "Lots of heart. I think she'll love it." Daniel studied the book for a moment before glancing back at her. "You always know the right choice." She looked down, feeling heat bloom across her cheeks. If only he knew how long she had carried these quiet, impossible feelings. How many nights she had imagined sharing cocoa with him after closing time, or leaning over book recommendations until their hands accidentally brushed. He paid for the book, their fingers barely grazing as she handed him the receipt. The moment lasted only a heartbeat, yet she felt it echo through her like a soft bell. As he turned to leave, he hesitated. "Emily?" he said. She looked up, surprised. "Yes?" He seemed to wrestle with something unspoken, his brow creasing ever so slightly, but then he shook his head with a small laugh, almost embarrassed. "Never mind. I'll see you soon." And then he was gone, swallowed into the swirl of winter outside. The rest of the morning passed uneventfully, but Emily kept replaying the moment. His brief pause, the look in his eyes, the way he seemed on the verge of saying something, and stopped himself. It left her even more adrift between two worlds, the one where Daniel Reeves held her heart, and the one where a stranger was slowly weaving himself into her days through ink and paper. By noon, she found herself glancing at the clock more often than she cared to admit. She wanted to hurry home, to check the mailbox again, even though she knew it was far too soon for another letter. Still, hope tugged at her like a child pulling on a sleeve. After closing the shop early for the festival preparations, Emily walked through town, absorbing the glow of lanterns being strung and booths being set up in the square. Children skated clumsily on the frozen pond, their laughter rising like sparkles into the crisp air. Hollyridge looked the way stories described Christmas, the kind of place where magic didn't feel like fantasy, but memory. Halfway home, she passed the post office just as the mail truck pulled away. A small, impulsive thrill pressed her footsteps faster until she reached her front walk. Her breath fogged in front of her as she opened the mailbox, not expecting much. But there it was. Another envelope. Her name written in the same elegant handwriting. She pressed the letter to her chest before rushing inside. Once the door clicked shut behind her, she tore the envelope open with trembling fingers. The letter inside was longer, more layered, filled with stories he had been hesitant to share before. He wrote about the loneliness that sometimes settled around him like a second winter. How the holidays were beautiful, yes, but also carried memories he couldn't quite outrun. He told her that her last letter had warmed something inside him he'd thought long frozen. That her honesty about Daniel had stirred an ache he recognized from his own past. The ache of wanting someone quietly, desperately, without knowing how to step closer without breaking the fragile balance between hope and disappointment. Emily read every word as if it were a rare treasure. There was a softness in his confessions, a vulnerability that made her chest tighten. She could feel him opening slowly, like a door creaking inward on well-oiled hinges. He ended with a sentence that made her breath catch. "You do not love quietly, Emily. You love deeply. I can tell. Whoever you care for is luckier than they will ever know." Tears prickled her eyes, not from sadness, but from the unexpected comfort of being understood by someone she didn't even know. Someone who might never stand before her, or speak her name aloud, or look at her the way Daniel did in her dreams. And yet, in these letters, she felt seen in a way she had never felt before. She wrote back immediately, pouring out her gratitude, telling him about the small victories and small fears of her days. She wrote about Daniel again, but she also wrote about herself, about how she often felt too quiet for the world, too gentle for the kind of love that demanded boldness. She told him she didn't know what she wanted from these exchanges, only that they made the winter nights feel less empty. And for the first time, she admitted something she hadn't dared speak. She felt safe with him. Days passed in a delicate pattern: work, festival preparations, letters exchanged like fragile snowflakes drifting between two souls who had never seen one another. Their connection deepened, slow but undeniable, woven with small confessions and careful truths. But somewhere in the back of Emily's mind, a question began to root itself. How long could something so intimate stay hidden in the dark? And if it ever came into the light, would it survive? Emily woke before sunrise, the world outside her window still wrapped in a blanket of deep blue and silver. The faint glow of Christmas lights reflected off the snowdrifts on her porch, shimmering like a promise waiting to be discovered. She lay still for a moment, listening to the soft hum of the heater and the distant whisper of wind against the glass. It was peaceful, quiet, yet her heart felt awake, alert, filled with an anticipation she had never known before the letters began. Her first thought, as it had been every morning lately, was whether a new reply might arrive today. The letters had become a lifeline in an unexpected way, not replacing her longing for Daniel, but expanding some forgotten part of her soul that had grown numb over the years. She knew she should be cautious. Falling into the comfort of words from an unknown man was dangerous, perhaps foolish. But the sincerity in his writing, the gentle vulnerability he shared, it all made her feel seen in a way that frightened and thrilled her. Still, she forced herself to linger in bed a little longer, letting the warmth of the blankets keep her grounded. The stranger's words from the last letter drifted through her thoughts like snowflakes settling on a windowsill. Some people arrive in our lives quietly, and somehow they become the sound we listen for. She pressed a hand to her chest. She didn't want to admit how much she was beginning to listen for him. Eventually, she rose, wrapped herself in her robe, and brewed a cup of tea. Cinnamon and cloves filled the air, mingling with the pine scent of her Christmas tree. She walked to her writing desk and glanced at the growing stack of letters tied with a red ribbon. It felt strange to think how much she cherished something that had started as a mistake, a misdelivered confession meant for another man entirely. After getting dressed, she bundled up and headed outside. The morning was crisp, the air cold enough to paint roses on her cheeks. As she made her way toward the bookstore, she paused at her mailbox, not really expecting anything, but unable to stop herself from checking. Nothing yet. She exhaled softly, both relieved and disappointed. Maybe that was a sign she was becoming too dependent on these letters. Maybe she needed to steady herself, find her footing again. But the moment she stepped onto the snowy sidewalk, her heart gave a startled leap. Someone was standing at the end of her walkway. A man. The early morning light obscured his features, but she recognized the scarf at once. The same man she had passed days earlier in town, the one who had made her pulse quicken with a sense of familiarity she couldn't explain. He seemed caught between walking away and staying. Snowflakes clung to his hair, catching the faint starlight still lingering in the early morning sky. He turned slightly, and his breath emerged in a visible cloud. "Oh, good morning," he said, startled. Emily blinked. "Good morning. Can I help you?" He hesitated. He looked nervous, almost as if he wasn't used to approaching strangers. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to… I wasn't waiting for you. That sounds strange. He ran a hand through his hair, sending a few snowflakes drifting to the ground. "I was taking a walk. I live nearby. I didn't realize this was your house." Emily felt a flicker of uncertainty. Not fear, but curiosity, as if the universe had nudged her shoulder. Something about him tugged at her, an echo she couldn't place. "That's all right," she said gently. "It's a quiet neighborhood. Nice for walking." He nodded, relief softening his expression. "It really is." For a moment they stood in silence, the wind brushing softly at their coats. "I should get going," he said. "Didn't mean to intrude." "You weren't," she said before she could stop herself. His smile was small and a bit shy, and something about it tugged on her heart. Then he turned and walked down the snowy sidewalk until he disappeared around the corner. Emily watched him leave, unsettled by the feeling that clung to her, like she had just brushed against something important, something unfinished. She shook it off and headed to work. The bookstore warmed her as soon as she stepped inside. The scent of books and pine garlands wrapped around her like a familiar embrace. She turned on the lights, each bulb adding a layer of golden comfort to the walls. It wasn't long before customers began trickling in, eager for holiday reads or last-minute gifts. Around midday, Daniel returned. Her heart performed its usual symphony of nervous stumbles. "Hey, Emily," he said, cheeks flushed from the cold. "I forgot to ask yesterday. Are you going to the tree lighting tonight?" She blinked, caught off guard. I think so. Are you?" He nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, my mom insists I go every year. You know how she is." Emily smiled softly. His mother adored her. She always had. "Maybe I'll see you there," she said, trying to sound casual. "Yeah," he said again, smiling at her in a way that made her chest tighten. "Maybe." He left with a wave, and the bookstore seemed to exhale around her. As the afternoon passed, the snowfall thickened, decorating the windows in delicate lace patterns. Emily cleaned and reorganized shelves, but her mind wandered endlessly. Toward Daniel, toward the stranger who walked by her house, toward the letters waiting somewhere between them. When she finally closed the shop for the day, the sky was already growing dark. Lanterns lit the streets, painting golden halos across the snow. She pulled her coat closer and walked toward the town square, where neighbors gathered with mugs of hot cider. Children chased each other around the Christmas tree, while adults exchanged warm greetings and stories of holiday plans. Emily stood near the edge of the crowd, letting the atmosphere sink into her. She was lost in the glitter of lights when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "You came." She turned. Daniel stood there, hands in his pockets, snow melting in his hair. The sight of him, framed by shimmering lights, stole her breath. "I did," she said. "It's beautiful tonight." "It is," he agreed, but his eyes remained on her. "I'm glad you're here." The tree lighting ceremony began. The mayor spoke briefly, children sang softly, and then the lights flickered on all at once, filling the square with brilliance. A cheer rose, echoing against the snow-covered rooftops. Emily smiled up at the tree, feeling its glow warm her from the inside out. And then, someone stepped beside her, a familiar presence. She turned her head. It was the man from her street, the man with the scarf. His eyes widened slightly as he saw her again so soon. "Hi," he said softly, almost breathlessly. Daniel's expression shifted, just a flicker, but enough for her to notice. "Do you two know each other?" Daniel asked gently. Emily shook her head quickly. "No, I just saw him earlier this morning." The man gave Daniel a polite nod. "Small town," he said lightly, though something in his gaze lingered on Emily for half a second longer than necessary. Something stirred in her, a quiet recognition she still couldn't name. Before she could say another word, the man stepped back into the crowd and disappeared. And yet, Emily felt the air he left behind charged with something she didn't understand. Later that night, when she finally walked home under the falling snow, she found a new letter waiting in her mailbox. Her heart thundered. Inside, the stranger wrote, "I passed by your house this morning. I didn't expect to see you, but seeing you, unexpectedly briefly, felt like turning a page I had read 1,000 times only to discover it was new." Emily's breath caught. Her fingers trembled. For the first time, a realization flickered inside her. A possibility, a terrifying, impossible possibility. What if the man she'd seen? What if the stranger wasn't as distant as she thought? Emily barely slept that night. Sleep came in small fragments, thin, fragile pieces that splintered every time she shifted beneath the blankets. Each time her eyes closed, she saw the man at the tree lighting ceremony. The way he'd looked at her, the way his breath had hitched when he recognized her, the lingering warmth in his gaze that felt too familiar, too knowing, too intimate. It shouldn't mean anything. She didn't know him. He didn't know her. Except he had known her house. He had walked by it. She had caught him standing at the end of her walkway. And now, in a letter that trembled in her hands, he had admitted he'd seen her that very morning, before she'd left for the bookstore, before she'd even realized he existed beyond a fleeting glimpse in town. She sat up in bed, pulling her knees to her chest. It wasn't fear that unsettled her. It was recognition. Not of who he was, but of a feeling she had only experienced through his writing. Warmth, tension, something tender unfolding slowly, like a winter bloom opening against all odds. The line replayed through her mind. Seeing you, unexpectedly, briefly, felt like turning a familiar page only to discover something new. Her heart ached with confusion, with longing, with possibility. The next morning, snow began falling in thick, steady sheets, the sky a soft blur of white. Hollyridge felt muffled under its weight, The world slowed into a gentle hush. Emily wrapped herself in a warm sweater and thick scarf before heading to the bookstore. The cold air snapped at her cheeks, but her mind was too preoccupied to notice. Inside, she tried to lose herself in the routine of shelving books and brewing spiced tea for customers. But her thoughts tangled restlessly around two men, one she had admired for years, one she had never met but somehow felt profoundly connected to. Daniel's lingering smile from the night before replayed in her mind. His quiet warmth, his familiar presence. She had always believed he could never look at her the way she looked at him. Then why had his expression changed when the stranger appeared beside her? Why had his posture stiffened, almost protectively? As she pondered it, the bookstore bell chimed. Emily looked up, expecting a customer with snow-dusted shoulders and frosted eyelashes. But it was Daniel, and he looked shaken. "Emily," he said, breathless. I need to talk to you." Her pulse stuttered. "Is everything all right?" He hesitated, voice caught on something delicate. "Can we talk somewhere quiet?" Her heart began to race. She locked the register drawer and followed him to the small reading nook in the back of the bookstore. Snow filtered softly through the windows, scattering patterns of light across the wooden floor. Daniel rubbed a hand over his face as if trying to find the right words. "I don't want to sound strange," he began, "and I don't want you to think I'm imagining things, but last night, at the tree lighting, that man who stood next to you," Emily's breath caught. "What about him?" Daniel paused, his jaw tightening with uncertainty. "I've seen him before, a few times. He moved back to town this fall, I think. He used to live here when we were kids. His name is..." But he didn't finish. Instead, he blinked hard and shook his head. "Actually, never mind. I might be wrong." He exhaled shakily. Something about the way he looked at you, like he knew you. It bothered me." Emily felt her heartbeat skitter. "Daniel, why would that bother you?" He froze. Color crept up his neck. He swallowed, then tried to mask it with a laugh that didn't quite land. "I don't know. Forget I said anything. I'm overthinking." He wasn't. She could feel it. For the first time in years, she sensed something shifting beneath Daniel's calm exterior, something she had never allowed herself to hope for. Before she could respond, the doorbell chimed again. A group of customers spilled inside, shaking snow from their coats. Daniel stepped back, clearing his throat. "We can talk later," he said softly. "If you want." She nodded. He left reluctantly, and the moment slipped away like a snowflake melting before it could land. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Emily's attention drifted constantly, toward Daniel's unfinished words, toward the stranger's letter folded safely in her coat pocket, toward the possibility that the two might be connected in ways she did not yet understand. By late afternoon, the snowfall turned fierce. Wind howled through the streets, pushing drifts up against doorways. Holly Ridge announced a storm warning, urging residents to stay indoors. Emily closed the bookstore early and hurried home, boots crunching through the rising snow. When she reached her porch, she spotted something that made her breath stop cold. An envelope. Frozen slightly at the edges, tucked carefully inside her mailbox as though placed there moments before the storm hit. The same handwriting. A new letter. She lifted it gently, cradling it against her chest as the wind whipped around her. Inside her cottage, she locked the door, set her coat aside, and curled up on the couch beneath a blanket. Candlelight flickered across the room. She broke the seal with trembling fingers and unfolded the paper. The letter was softer this time, gentler, almost hesitant. The stranger wrote about seeing her at the tree lighting ceremony again, though he kept his distance. He wrote about how beautiful the town looked under the lanterns, but how she was the one thing that drew his eye. He confessed he had hoped she might notice him too, though he hadn't expected her to. He wrote about childhood memories of Holly Ridge, about leaving and returning, about searching quietly for a sense of belonging. Then, his words shifted. "I don't want my presence to frighten you. I'm not trying to intrude. I just feel pulled toward you in a way I can't fully understand. You said you felt safe writing to me. I feel safe reading your words. That has to mean something." Emily felt her throat tighten. The next paragraph stole her breath. I know that letter wasn't meant for me. I know your heart leans towards someone else. But I also know what it means to love quietly. And I want you to know something, Emily. Something I shouldn't admit but can't seem to hold back. I don't think it was an accident that your letter found me." Her chest ached. Her pulse thrummed. Thunder rumbled faintly outside, an unusual sound for winter. But she didn't move. She was caught between warmth and fear, longing and confusion. The letter ended with a line that struck her like lightning. "There is something you don't know yet. Something important. And when the time is right, I promise I'll tell you." Emily's breath shuddered. What was he hiding? Why did Daniel look so tense last night? And why did she feel like the storm outside was nothing compared to the one gathering inside her heart? She folded the letter slowly, holding it against her chest as the wind howled outside. In the quiet stormlight, one truth settled over her like fresh snow. She was standing at the edge of something that could change everything. And she had no idea which man's footsteps she was hearing first. The storm lasted through the night, shaking Emily's cottage with gusts that rattled the window panes. She barely slept. The stranger's final line echoed through her like a bell stuck mid-ring. "There is something you don't know yet. Something important." No matter how she tried to quiet her mind, she couldn't shake the feeling that the meaning hovered just out of reach, like a silhouette blurred behind frosted glass. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw two faces. One familiar and warm, one unknown, but increasingly close. The snow outside calmed as dawn approached, but inside, her thoughts churned endlessly. By morning, the world lay still. The sky was a washed-out silver, and a thick white blanket covered Hollyridge in a peaceful hush. Emily wrapped herself in her coat and stepped onto her porch. The cold air bit at her skin, but it was refreshing, grounding. She needed clarity. She needed something to break through the tangle of her emotions. Her first instinct was to check the mailbox. Of course, it was empty. No mail could have possibly been delivered during the storm. Still, she opened it gently, as though the universe might have hidden another letter inside simply because she needed one. Nothing. She trudged through the snow toward the bookstore, her boots sinking deep with each step. Hollyridge was nearly deserted, the storm having worn people out. Only the bakery showed signs of life, warm lights glowing behind fogged windows. Emily paused briefly, letting the scent of fresh bread drift toward her before continuing on. When she reached the bookstore, she was surprised to find someone standing at the door. Daniel. His presence jolted her heart. He stood with his hands shoved into his coat pockets, hair tousled, cheeks flushed from the cold. And there was something in his eyes, something soft but undeniably troubled. "Morning," he said, voice breathless. "I was hoping you'd come early." Emily stared at him, startled. "Is everything okay?" He hesitated, glancing at the snow-covered street behind him. "Can we talk inside?" She unlocked the door, and they stepped into the warm glow of the shop. Daniel brushed snowflakes from his shoulders, exhaling deeply as though trying to steady himself. "I didn't sleep last night," he confessed. Emily's stomach tightened. "Why not?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and she felt the room tilt. "Because of you." Her breath caught. The words hung between them, fragile and unexpectedly powerful. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, pacing a small circle before stopping in front of her again. "Yesterday at the tree lighting, something hit me. Something I didn't expect." His voice faltered. "When that man stood next to you, and the way he looked at you, like he knew you, I felt jealous." Emily's heart slammed against her ribs. "I don't get jealous," he continued quietly. "Not like that. And especially not about you. I mean," he sighed, flustered. "Not because you're not worth it, you are. God, Emily, you're incredible. But because I didn't think I had the right." Her breath trembled out of her. Daniel Reeves, gentle, steady, untouchable Daniel, was standing inside her bookstore confessing jealousy like it was a truth dragged out of him by some invisible force. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You never—" He shook his head. "Because I thought you saw me as just a regular customer, someone who came in for books and small talk." His voice lowered into something tender. "But I've always noticed you. Every December, every time I walk into this place, I see you." Emily's chest tightened painfully. "I never said anything," he added softly. "And I should have." She felt her pulse in her throat. The confession she had written, meant for him, stolen by fate, throbbed in her memory. The stranger's words about love, about quiet longing, about feeling something in her he couldn't ignore. But now Daniel was here, speaking everything she had once wished for. Her knees felt weak. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. Daniel stepped closer. "Tell me if I'm too late." Her lips parted, but no words came. She felt torn down the middle, between the man she had loved quietly for years and the man who had slipped into her heart through handwritten lines and unexpected honesty. A knock at the door jolted them both. Emily turned. Her heart stopped. The man with the scarf stood on the other side of the glass, snow falling gently around him. He looked nervous, hesitant, but also hopeful. Daniel stiffened. Emily's breath came in a sharp inhale. Slowly, she opened the door. "Hi," the man said softly. His voice was familiar, painfully familiar. "I didn't know if you'd be open," he continued, "but I needed to talk to you." Daniel stepped protectively closer, though Emily couldn't tell if he did it consciously or not. The man looked between them, taking in the scene, the closeness, the tension, the unspoken presence of something fragile, and his eyes softened, almost sadly. "I'm sorry," he said, voice breaking slightly. "I didn't mean to interrupt." Emily shook her head quickly. "No, you're not interrupting. She swallowed. "Did you need something?" He took a deep breath, gathering courage. "My name is Nathan." The name struck a chord inside her. She didn't know why, but the way he said it, the gentleness, the trembling edge, made something inside her shift. "I grew up here," he continued, "left when I was 16, and when I came back this fall, everything felt different. Except the bookstore. It looked the same, it felt the same, and then I saw you." Emily froze. The world narrowed. Daniel's breath hitched beside her. "I didn't know your name," Nathan went on. "I just saw you arranging the window display one evening, and you looked so peaceful, like you belonged here in a way I never did. And for a moment, I wished I belonged somewhere too." He swallowed. "A few days later, the mailman handed me an envelope that wasn't mine, with your handwriting inside." Her heart stopped. Daniel's eyes widened. Nathan nodded slowly, voice shaking. "Yes, Emily, I'm the one who got your letter." Silence crashed through the store like thunder. Emily felt weightless, unmoored. "I know it wasn't meant for me," Nathan said, "and I tried to return it. I swear I did. But I read the first line, and it felt like I'd been waiting for those words without knowing it." His voice cracked. "Your honesty, your longing, your heart. I couldn't walk away from it." Emily trembled. Daniel's jaw tightened. Nathan looked directly at her. "I didn't want to mislead you. I didn't want to hide who I was. I just didn't know how to tell you. I wanted to give you time, space, choice." He stepped closer, gently, carefully. "But last night, when I saw you at the tree lighting, with him, I realized I couldn't keep hiding the truth from you." The room pulsed with emotion. Snow whispered against the windows. Emily felt her heart straining between two worlds, one old and familiar, one new and full of possibility. Nathan took one more breath, his voice almost a whisper. "Your letter didn't find me by accident, Emily. It changed something in me. And I think it might have changed something in you too." Emily's knees nearly gave out. Daniel's expression was unreadable, a storm of heartbreak, shock, and something like regret. And Emily, she stood at the center of it all, between the man she had loved for years and the man who had held her heart in his hands through words alone. Her breath trembled into the silent bookstore, and she knew whatever she chose next would alter everything. The next day arrived with a brittle, crystalline clarity that made every sound snap and ring. Hollyridge seemed to breathe more easily after the storm, a town refreshed and rearranged by snow, calmer and cleaner, its lights sharper against the white. Emily woke with a sense of being on the edge of something, as though the world itself were waiting to exhale and let whatever had been gathering finally land. She dressed carefully, fingers moving slower than usual, as if each motion might betray the tremor that lived in her chest. The letters lay stacked on her desk, their ribbons still loosely tied from the night before. Nathan's confession that he had been the one to receive and read the misdelivered letter, that he had tried to return it, that he had felt something he couldn't explain, had landed like a stone in her chest. Daniel's sudden jealousy, his halting confession of feelings, had shifted everything she thought she knew about the future she had imagined in the soft corner of her mind. For the first time, Emily saw the danger in tidy dreams. They could be beautiful, but they could also be a trap for a life lived safely, careful, and contained. The letters had shown her an alternative, a risk, a voice, an unexpected warmth that had crept into her nights and altered her mornings. At the bookstore, she moved through the day with the kind of focus that only people harboring complicated decisions know. The mind half here, half on the path ahead. Customers drifted in and out, and she helped them pick books, wrap gifts, and smile at jokes that suddenly felt thin. When Daniel came in around noon, she braced herself for the conversation she knew would come. He lingered near the counter this time, hands folded like a shield. "Emily," he said softly, "can we talk?" She nodded, stepping away from the register. They found a quiet corner between cookbooks and travel guides, the muffled sounds of customers like a soft backdrop. Daniel's face was open and raw, no practiced calm, no gentle deflection. Today there was only honesty in his posture. "I don't know how to say this," he began. "I love you. That's straightforward and ugly and true." He gave a small, unhelpful laugh. "I should have told you years ago. I should have been braver. I thought I could live with the small joys of knowing you, with your presence like a light I passed every December and never reached for." Her throat closed. She had always lived with this version of him. Steady, safe, full of a warmth that made her home seem possible. But she also had lived with a newer, stranger warmth that arrived by mail and whispered permission into her life. Daniel took a breath. "I don't want to force anything. I don't want to make you choose one way or the other. But I need you to know what I feel. I need you to know because part of me hopes that maybe you might consider me." Emily could see the honesty in him, the courage of a man who had kept his heart quiet for so long and now set it down like an offering. Her chest ached at the tenderness and the ache of what could have been. "I'm grateful, Daniel," she said finally, her voice steady but small. "You have been kind to me in ways I couldn't name. You're steady and good and everything I thought I wanted." He swallowed, his jaw working. "And?" She hesitated. How could she compress months of letters, weeks of small revelations, the ache of years, and the sudden, overwhelming clarity that the man who had written to her knew parts of her she had never given anyone into one single sentence? "I don't have an easy answer," she said truthfully. "But I won't lie to you, something has changed. Because of letters, because of another person who read my heart. I need to understand what that means for me. For us." Daniel's face fell, but a small, brave smile pressed itself up. "Then I'll wait," he said. "However long you need. Even if I'm not the one you choose. I won't resent you for following your heart." The weight of his words warmed and stung at once. Emily wanted to tell him everything, to explain the nights she had spent breathing in someone else's sentences, to tell him that she had felt seen by a stranger. But she hesitated, recalling Nathan's promise to tell her something important when the time was right. Before she could speak again, the bell over the bookstore door chimed. Nathan stepped in slowly, brushing snow from his coat. He paused when he saw them, an expression she couldn't read flickering across his face. "Emily," he said, voice careful, "I need to talk to you." Daniel's posture tightened, the quiet, protective instinct pulsing as surely as a heartbeat. He remained where he was, but Emily slid over to stand beside him, feeling the press of their combined presence like a hinge. Nathan took a breath. He folded his hands as if steadying them. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you before. But I was wrong to wait. I was reckless, in my own cowardly way." Emily's heart pounded. She felt simultaneously terrified and oddly relieved that the moment had come. "When I found your letter," Nathan continued, looking directly at her, "I didn't plan to read it any further than a glance. It wasn't mine. I thought I could put it into the mail and it would—" He swallowed. "I couldn't. I read it. And then I read it again. I don't know why. Maybe because I was alone, maybe because my life outside of here had been heavy and I was starving for kindness." Daniel shifted beside her. Nathan bowed his head as if performing penance. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want to complicate an already tender thing. But I should have. I'm sorry. I was wrong to keep it from you." Emily felt a rush of anger and sympathy, and something like pity that made the corners of her eyes sting. "Why did you write back?" she asked. "Why did you continue the letters if you felt it was wrong?" Nathan's gaze lifted to hers, vulnerability exposed. "Because your words did something to me. They loosened something that had been tight for years. They reminded me that I wanted to belong somewhere, that I wanted to be brave enough to risk being known." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope, one she recognized because it matched the ones she had sent and received. "I thought maybe we could talk, properly, not just in letters and not just in stolen moments." He looked at Daniel, then back at Emily. "There's one more thing I should tell you." His voice thinned. "When I left Holly Ridge as a teen, it wasn't just to see the world. My father fell ill not long after, and I had to make choices that kept me away for years. I didn't feel like I could build anything while I was carrying that. I thought returning quietly would be easier. That was cowardice too. I'm telling you because you deserve the truth." Emily listened, the snow-scented air in her lungs, the weight of 2 men and 1,000 small decisions pressing around her. "What do you want, Nathan?" she asked at last. "Really?" He met her eyes, steady, pleading. "I want to know you, not only the version on the page, not only the idea of you folded into my pockets and letters. I want to know the sound of your laugh, to see how you make tea, to be present in your days, to try, if you'll have me, to be someone who sees you and wants to be seen in return." She felt that same thing that had drawn her to the letters, a pull not because it was easy, but because it felt like truth. Here was someone who had been moved by her most vulnerable words and had chosen to be brave enough to say so. He had confessed wounds and reasons and returned, asking to start honestly. Across from her, Daniel's face had shifted from expectation to a complex tenderness that seemed to contain resignation and blessing. He stepped forward with a small smile that hurt and healed all at once. "Emily," he said softly, "choose what your heart needs. I won't stand in the way. I care about you too much to make you stay for my comfort." It was the kind of love she had always wanted, steady enough to give her room. Emily felt tears hot behind her eyes. She thought of the bookstore, of the letters that had untied something inside her, of the small savors of the town, and the boldness of the stranger who had risked appearing in her life. She thought about safety and risk, about the way pages of a letter could become steps across a room. Her voice was small, but certain. "I need to follow what feels honest to me. I don't have every answer, and I won't make you promises I can't keep. But I want to explore whatever this is, with Nathan. Slowly, openly, and with honesty." Daniel's face changed in a way that tore at her heart. Pain, yes, but also an acceptance luminous in its kindness. "Then I'll be here," he said, "as a friend, as someone who wants the best for you. If that's what makes you happy, you'll have my blessing." Nathan exhaled like a man who had been given permission to breathe. He reached for her hand, gentle, careful, and she took it, feeling a spark that was different from the one she had carried for years. It was not lesser, it was simply new. It had been forged from pages and quiet courage. Outside, the town bell chimed the hour. Snow drifted in threads against the windows, and a lightness settled in her chest. She knew this road wouldn't be simple. There would be awkward mornings and conversations to have, and an honest navigation of what had been hidden and what needed tending. But in that moment, surrounded by the hush of books and the soft hum of winter, Emily felt a truth settle into place. Sometimes, the greatest gifts arrive misdelivered, and sometimes they arrive right when you finally decide to open them. Christmas morning glowed with soft light and a hush that felt sacred. Hollyridge's roofs wore a crust of frost, and every chimney breathed a small plume of smoke into the pale sky. Emily woke early, not because excitement pulled her out of bed, but because the world felt different, richer, louder in all the quiet ways that mattered. Nathan sat on her kitchen steps with 2 mugs of steaming cider, cheeks pink with cold, eyes bright with a gentle, nervous joy. He handed her one and didn't speak, because words felt almost too bold for the sweetness between them. They spent the day wandering the town together, visiting the bakery for a shared cinnamon roll, and laughing when a child bumped into them with sticky fingers and an apology. They talked about books and childhood memories, about small embarrassments and the things that had shaped them. Nathan told stories of the places he'd seen and the mistakes he'd made. Emily read passages aloud from the book she had chosen for his mother. Each moment built, small as soft snowflakes, into something steady. That evening, Daniel stopped by with a wrapped book and a warm grin, his presence easy and sincere. He stayed long enough to share in their laughter and to help drape a strand of lights across Emily's porch. When he left, he hugged Emily with a tenderness that felt like the close of a chapter and the blessing of a friend who loved well. Emily folded the letters, each reply, each folded line, and placed them in the drawer where she kept small treasures. She ran her fingers over the ribbon and smiled. Some things in life arrived in unexpected ways. Some gifts required brave honesty and the willingness to step into the unknown. As snow began to fall again, soft and steady, Nathan took her hand and guided her home. They walked slowly, talking about everything and nothing. The lights of Hollyridge glowing like promises along their path. Inside, beneath the glow of the tree, Emily felt a quiet certainty settle. Her heart had been found, not by accident, nor by fate alone, but by the simple courage to speak, to read, and to be brave enough to answer. And on that gentle Christmas night, with the town tucked around them like a lullaby, she let herself believe that whatever came next would be met together, one honest day at a time.